Hi, you're listening to the Stepan Snigirev podcast, a show about Bitcoin and Austrian economics. Today for episode 205, are you looking for an easy Bitcoin multi-signature wallet that doesn't require an electrum server, or perhaps one with support for different Bitcoin hardware wallets and a different interface? Well, for this episode, we're speaking with Stepan Snigirev and Ben Kaufman. This show brought to you by swanbitcoin.com, the best place to auto-stack your Bitcoin in the US with incredibly easy setup and low fees. I personally appreciate that Swan is Bitcoin only and is dedicated to Bitcoin education. Go to swanbitcoin.com/Lavera to get $10 of free Bitcoin when you start stacking with Swan. And Swan has some news to share. They've had massive demand for daily buys since the day they launched the service. One of the big positives of regular recurring buys is smoothing out price volatility. So buying daily will catch those dips even better than buying weekly. There are a limited number of spots in the Swan Daily Buys beta, so head over to swanbitcoin.com/dailybuys to get into the beta. That's swanbitcoin.com/dailybuys. This show also brought to you by Unchained Capital, Bitcoin native financial services. Unchained Capital are providing multi-signature and Bitcoin-backed loans, and they're really doing it in a way that respects the not your keys, not your coins ethos of Bitcoin. So if you're thinking about your Bitcoin security, why not go from zero to multi-sig with Unchained? Or if you're sitting on a single signature hardware wallet, this is another option for you. They are offering the Vault Concierge onboarding package, where you can get a guided setup call and have hardware wallet devices mailed out to you. So the price ranges from $1,500, which includes 2 hardware wallets, down to $1,000 just for the setup assistance, and this includes $1,000 in the vault. Use code Lavera for a discount. And don't forget to check out Parker Lewis's series, Gradually Then Suddenly, available on the website. Go to unchained-capital.com to find out more. Stepan and Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Stefan. Very nice to be here again.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Stepan, I know you've been on the show twice before, but perhaps just for any listeners who are a little bit newer, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, we are originally I came from quantum physics into Bitcoin and started working on hardware stuff mostly. Now it looks like we have both the desktop app and the hardware wallet that we are working on. And currently, me and Maurice are running a small company, a startup that is working on these products and also the enterprise solution.
Awesome. And Ben, let's hear a little bit from you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the Spectre Project.
So I'm a software developer, occasionally contributing to some open source Bitcoin projects for like the past year or so, I think. And I just stumbled upon a video of Stepan setting up a multisig on Twitter with Spectre. I've been looking for something like that, like connecting a Bitcoin full node with multisigs for quite some time, and with hardware wallets in general. But I couldn't really find anything that worked very well, that was convenient. But for the first time, this was like something that just worked for me, really easy. So I kind of just started using it, and whenever I wanted a new feature, I just started writing it myself and editing that. And from like small contributions, like avoiding address reuse, for example, or labeling UTXOs, just stuff that I needed, I just continued contributing more and more often.
Excellent. And so we're going to talk about Specter Desktop today. So maybe, Stepan, can you just tell us a little bit about why did you start this project? Why are you making it?
Yeah, sure. So we started it a year ago, I think, roughly. And the main reason was that first, I actually needed a wallet that would work with our hardware wallet. I was thinking that, okay, it's nice to use Bitcoin Core for that. And as we were from the very start working on the multi-signature supports, we also wanted other signers. So the very first version of Specter Desktop was the GUI that was only working with Spectre DIY and cold cards, so only air-gapped hardware wallets. Then people actually started contributing, and we got an integration with HWI, the hardware wallet interface by Andrew Chow, and we instantly got support for all hardware wallets that are out there. Yeah, so the main idea is that, okay, I want to run my own full node, and Bitcoin Core is very powerful in that sense, but it is not very convenient to work with it, especially with hardware wallets. So the goal of Specter Desktop is to kind of close this gap and actually provide a convenient user interface for hardware wallets to Bitcoin Core. And the main focus is on the multi-signature and on the multi-signature with actually hardware wallets. So we have less problems with the security because we are only like a small coordinator app that is in between this kind of very well tested and powerful tools, Bitcoin Core and HWI.
I see. Yeah. So I guess just for listeners who, if you're not as clear what's going on here, so some of the discussion is around how can we leverage Bitcoin Core as much as possible, because let's say that code base has been well reviewed, and use get a multi-signature setup going in a way that's easy for the user, but is minimal in the sense that it's mostly pushing most of the kind of the heavy lifting over to Bitcoin Core. But then how do you do it with your own Bitcoin node for if you want to have your own privacy or if you want to be doing your own verification? So I suppose that's kind of the focus. So Ben, did you want to just tell us a little bit? What does it look like if I try to set it up and use it?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, you just set up a Bitcoin Core full node. It can be on a laptop, it can be on a Raspberry Blitz or my node or whatever. But just setting that up. After that, you can. Right now, we're working on very simple like desktop apps, which you can just install normally. We're very close to finishing that. But for now, you just you have like executables which you can run on your computer, and it will just run Specter Desktop as a server on your machine. Yeah, and then you can start using it like by adding your devices, your hardware wallets. So you can connect to your computer, your Trezor, your Ledger, use your cold card in air-gapped or directly with your computer. Basically, we support all major hardware wallets. We support air-gapped devices like Electrum on your mobile phone, on an air-gapped computer or so. Basically, you just need to extract the pub keys, the public keys of your device, and import them into Spectre. So we can do that automatically for non-air-gapped devices, or for air-gapped devices, you can just either scan a QR code if the device supports it, or whatever. Like it depends on the device you use. But then after setting up your devices on Spectre, you can start just playing with them, creating multi-sigs with them, whatever setups you want, 2 or 3, 3 or 5. You can do like just single wallets. You can do basically whatever you want. It's quite flexible, I think. Yeah, and just once you have wallet set up, you can start receiving funds. You can start sending funds. All signing is taking place on the devices which you're using. So if you're using a hardware wallet, you just connect it to your computer and Spectre communicates with it. Or if you're using an air-gap device, you can, for example, Spectre do it yourself. You can just scan the transaction with QR scanner and then scan it back on your computer to sign it. Yeah, and that's it basically.
Yeah, maybe I can add a few things. Currently we have we support different setups. So you can run Bitcoin Core on the remote machine. You can connect your Specter Desktop that is on local machine to the remote machine, or you can run both of them on the remote machine, and then you run another instance of Spectre Desktop, but in this HWI bridge on your computer. And also Bitcoin Core itself can be either a full node or a prune node. So, for example, what I do, I run Spectre on the cheap, together with the Bitcoin Core on the cheap VPS server. So I just bought like a server that is $5 per month, and it is extremely pruned. So it just takes 10 gigabytes of space. And I'm using it to watch my funds, prepare the transactions, and then whenever I need to do the transaction, I can either use airgap hardware wallets to sign it, or I can use this HWI bridge mode to communicate with my hardware wallets that are connected to my laptop. So it's pretty convenient, I would say. And currently we have support also of Raspberry Blitz and MyNode. So the guys who are maintaining these projects actually integrated it. So I think that on Raspberry Blitz it's just single-click installation, and Kim implemented that. And MyNode, I think it is on like premium package, whatever it means, and it is also can be installed pretty easily.
Yep. And so I guess just to put it into context for listeners who might not be familiar in the space, people who want to do multi-signature, and if they're not really at an advanced level, then usually it's, the usual choice for people is to use a guided provider, so such as my sponsor, Unchained Capital, or Casa. And then now in terms of if you want to do it yourself, probably up until now, the main option that people have done is Electrum. But now we're starting to see some of these other options that come up. So obviously Specter Desktop is one of the ones that looks promising. Also, there is Unchained Capital's Caravan, which is also by, again, Unchained Capital are my sponsor, but they offer Caravan, which is like a way to also do it yourself. And also there's Lily Wallet by Kevin Mulcrone as well, which is also another promising project as well. So I guess, could you guys just tell us a little bit about how you see Spectre Desktop as compared to some of the other options out there, let's say, versus, say, Electrum or any of the others?
Yeah, so Electrum, for example, it either connects to remote servers, and then you don't have your own full node and you give up the privacy. Or you need to run an Electrum personal server or Electros. So, for example, Electros, it takes 20% more space comparing to a normal Bitcoin Core. Basically, none of these options actually rely on the wallet functionality of Bitcoin Core. But yeah, Electrum works fine. So I tried it with hardware wallets, and they also support very many hardware wallets. The only problem is that I cannot just run simple Bitcoin Core without any extra load on top of that. Comparing to Caravan supports only Trezor and Ledger, I think.
Ledger.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that every time when you sign a transaction with Trezor, you actually need to go to their website to confirm that or something. I'm not quite sure. But basically, Caravan is a very interesting tool. Too bad that there are not very many hardware wallet supports. And Lily Wallet, I can't really say anything. I didn't try it.
Sure. And I suppose part of this also, it comes to how do you make it easy for the user who is not so technical? Because obviously the number of technical users, it's probably less than 5% of the overall population, if you will. And so one of the barriers for many people is that they have to install different libraries. For example, with Electrum, if they want to use Linux, they've got to make sure they go and install these different, like the UDEV rules and so on. There's kind of a bit of configuration involved. So can you just tell us a little bit about when you're setting up with Spectre Desktop, how does that compare from a setup perspective, and how technical is it? And I can also understand it might be kind of more technical now, but you're planning to make it easier for people as well. So it's more like a GUI and a double click and install sort of thing.
Yeah, so right now we are just finalizing the proper desktop app, which can be installed normally like any other one. So we already have it for for Mac OS and almost ready for Linux and like pretty much halfway for Windows. So I hope this will be like at least the Mac and the Linux will be out until this episode airs. But currently, what we already have ready for all platforms is an executable which you can just download on your computer and just double click and it will run everything. But it like in the past you had to install it through Python through pip, if you know about that. So it was a bit more complicated. But like right now it's quite simple already and going to be like any other normal desktop app very, very soon.
Yeah, at the moment it actually launches the terminal, so you always have this terminal window popping up and printing debug stuff, so that's not very nice. And Windows, oh my God, Windows is always causing plenty of problems. So we actually started packaging it mostly because of the Windows setup, because even installing Python is a nightmare there.
And so one of the big features that you guys are building with Spectre Desktop is that you have more of a focus around using unsigned PSBT, partially signed Bitcoin transactions, and also the use of QR codes as well. So listeners, if you haven't already, make sure you listen to episode 97 with my friend Michael Flaxman, who spells out some of the reasons why we care about some of these aspects. But can you tell us a little bit about the HWI aspect also, and also which devices are supported inside Spectre Desktop?
Mm-hmm. So right now we're supporting pretty much all major devices. So Trezor, Buff1 and T, Cold Card, KeepKey, Ledger, Electrum as an air-gapped mode. We even support Bitcoin Core as a hot wallet, though we don't really recommend using a hot wallet. But we also support that. We also support Spectre Do-It-Yourself, of course, and Kobo, which is another air-gapped device using QR codes, which is fairly new. But yeah, so that's pretty much the devices we're supporting. Soon also Bitbox 2 will be added to hardware wallet integration. There is an open PR for that there, and once it's added, it's just like a few minutes of work for us to add it also to Spectre. So we can easily support that as well very soon. So yeah, just hardware wallet integration handles most of the heavy lifting with communicating with the hardware wallets for us. And working and air-gapped devices, they're all supporting PSBT, which, if anybody doesn't know, is just partially signed Bitcoin transaction. It is a standard way to use and interact and pass around a Bitcoin transaction for signing between devices. So yeah, all Spectre uses that for everything. Hardware wallet integration uses that. Bitcoin Core uses that. All air-gap devices are using it. The Trezor and Ledger and other devices which are connected directly to your laptop doesn't really use that exactly, like not natively, but hardware wallet interface of Android Show like parses that. So we don't really need to worry about that as well. So everything just uses PSBT.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the way it looks like everything is going towards a PSBT future, which is hopefully making it a little bit easier for software developers and for hardware hardware creators as well to make wallets that can pass around the information to each other in a way that's easy for them to understand what they're sort of saying, I guess. And for the listener who is using your hardware wallet to keep your private key secure, well then the PSBT is how you can pass that information from, say, your Spectre Desktop to your cold card or to your Kobo Vault or etc. to sign. And also, it's interesting you mentioned around cross compatibility. So you mentioned there that you might even have Electrum can actually be part of your quorum of keys for Spectre Desktop. Is there any other aspects around cross compatibility there you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, sure. So what we currently have, for example, we have also been working with Fully Noded, which is an iOS app for interacting with your full node. So we have been working with them on compatibility. So you can both use that as a signing device, if I remember correctly, and you can import and export wallets from Spectre over there to watch them over there as well, and vice versa. We also planning to add support to import and export to Electrum. So you don't just use it as a signing device. You can also, if you for some reason want to use that as your wallet software, you can migrate easily or migrate from there to Spectre. And the same hopefully for Carbon as well. We still need to check that, but yeah, that we're planning to.
Yeah, so the important thing here is that it would be very nice to have cross compatibility with different software, such that if something breaks in Spectre Desktop, and during the development we sometimes introduce bugs or whatever happens during the update, you shouldn't be locked out of your funds, right? So you should still have access to your funds. So ideally, you could just install Electrum and import the wallet and use it there, or just keep it just in case. So like normally you use Spectre Desktop, for example, but if something breaks, then you can always fire up Electrum and use that to sign the transaction to send the funds. And also other way around. So if people decide to migrate from Electrum to Spectre Desktop, it should be as easy as importing a wallet file.
So just on the idea of working without having an Electrum server as well. So we were touching on this. So I guess typically people who want to do this, they might have to. It takes additional computing power, hard drive space, and so on. How is it working here? Where you're basically doing the same. You're doing a similar function, but without having an Electrum server. How's that working?
Yeah, so Electrum server, what it normally does, it creates so first it requires a Bitcoin Core to run with TX index, such that you can actually look up all the transactions. And also Electros, for example, creates an address index. So you can look up transactions and balances for any address. And in principle, well, you don't care about all other addresses out there. You only care about your own addresses. And Bitcoin Core wallet functionality already provides all these features. So the only drawback here is that if you're importing a very old wallet where you have plenty of transactions, then you need to rescan. So you still can use just a bare Bitcoin Core without any extra flags like TX index or additional indexing. But if you're importing an old wallet, then you need to wait for, I don't know, depending on your computer, but it can be even hours to rescan full blockchain to actually see your balance. So this is the problem, but you don't import wallets very often, right? So once you actually set everything up, then you just use wallet functionality available in Bitcoin Core.
Great. And also wondering whether you would look at or consider light clients using, say, like compact block filters, the BIP 157, 158 style, or any other style of light client.
Yeah, we are open to that. I mean, we will look into that, but I think like more in the future. Like it's definitely not going to be available short term. And anyway, personally, I would not really recommend light clients. I think full nodes are more secure and generally better. But we will be open to look about something like Neutrino, as you said. I think it can make sense in some scenarios, and it's not. I think it's a good compromise if you can't have a Bitcoin full node. But right now we already support just pruned Bitcoin nodes as well. So you can. It takes like what 10 gigabytes maybe, which is definitely not terrible for like any desktop, I think, or at least most desktops. So I think for now this is not something very important. But we are open to that. I mean, we will check that once we have the time.
Also, just on the topic of building your own hardware wallet. So, Stepan, you mentioned a little bit earlier around the Spectre DIY, which was the one of the projects that you're doing at Crypto Advance. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that interrelates in with Specter Desktop?
Yeah, so I already mentioned that we started all that just to get integration for Spectre DIY. So the idea there is that we want to have a hardware wallet that have a completely different security model compared to normal hardware wallets. And one of them is that we want to avoid a supply chain attack. So we actually design it to be able to build it from off-the-shelf components. So you just go to your local electronics store or you shop online, like a general purpose microcontroller developer board and the QR code scanner, and then you just put it all together, put the firmware there, and it just works. And yeah, it is air-gapped. It does work with PSBT natively. It works with wallet descriptors natively. So not full support of wallet descriptors, but like the most common ones. And in principle, I think that it can evolve into something nice in the future. But at the moment, I think it's really like a project for tinkerers and maybe for developers that want to try out new interesting things, because we are not also looking into anything. So like an experimental platform, let's say.
All right, yeah. So, and also, I wanted to just dig a little bit deeper into the Spectre Desktop app as well. So, wanted to talk through a little bit some of the features that are there. So, I've seen just from reading some of the documentation, I've seen you have coin selection there, and you've got labeling as well. So, can you tell us a little bit around how those are done and what's happening with those?
Yeah, so we're just basically taking advantage of existing features in Bitcoin Core and making them easily usable. So Bitcoin Core already like allows you to do coin selection, allows you to manage labels, everything you can do through the RPC, which this is how we interact with the Bitcoin Core. So yeah, we're just trying to take advantage of all the important features, first of all, of Bitcoin Core and of the hardware wallet. So coin selection, I think it's quite important. It just means that you can choose which UTXOs you want to spend in a certain transaction. Labeling allows you to better manage the UTXOs and understand like what address you are sending to or what address you are receiving to, like the description, where it came from, so you can better manage your privacy first of all, and just your funds as well. Besides that, we also support like dynamic or manual like fee settings. So if you want to adjust for better confirmation times, or you just want to do it like manually, whatever you choose. We recently added, for example, also on sending transactions, you can send now batch transactions to save gas. So basically, just instead of sending, if you want to send like 5 transactions to 5 different people, like to an exchange, to a service provider, etc., you can just do it all in one transaction. You just input the amount you want to send to each of the addresses you want to send to, and everything is going through in one transaction, which is usually better for fees and for privacy. Besides that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think, as an example, you might be, let's say you're running a Bitcoin business and you need to do payroll and pay out the employees, and you could batch that transaction, let's say, to the different people, and then it's all in one transaction. So there's a fee saving there. Although obviously they would then have to think about privacy and so on, but that's a potential saving there. But yeah, tell us a bit as well about address verification. So I understand that's something you're looking at. And I understand that's also quite difficult depending on which hardware device we are talking about.
Yeah. So for example, Ledger is probably the worst in that. So it doesn't allow for verification of multi-sig addresses at all, which we can't really solve because this is something in the Ledger firmware itself. But for all other wallets, we just very recently finished allowing full verification on the device. So we added that to hardware wallet integration as well. So currently we allow verifying on Trezor, on KeepKey, Spectre Do-It-Yourself, obviously, on Coldcard. We support change verification. So when you're sending a multi-sig transaction, you also want to make sure that the change address that you're using is generated from the same XPubs that that your wallet is using, that your multisig is composed of. So you're not sending to a malicious address, to a malicious like multisig. If, for example, someone switched the public keys, so we want to make sure that the address you're sending to the change is correct. So we just added verification of that on Trezor and KeepKey, and it's already available also on Coldcard. So yeah, I think the address verification is quite important, as you, of course, the entire purpose of using hardware wallets is not to trust the computer you're using it from, that you assume it is compromised. So we finished basically adding all verification for all major wallets, basically all of the wallets that we support except Ledger, which doesn't allow that. But for all the others, we are already supporting address verification. So you can verify everything on the device itself. So even if your computer is compromised, you can make sure you're using it trustlessly, basically.
Yeah. All right. So just to replay that, because that was probably a bit much for people to follow if they're a bit newer. So what's going on is if you're doing a Bitcoin transaction, generally speaking, you want to look at your hardware device to check the address that you are either spending to, or that you're checking like for a receive address. And so this is a feature where you would, before you spend to a particular address or you're receiving, it shows you on the device. And so you're checking that address on the device to make sure, just in case so there's some malware or there's some, hack or attacker in terms of your desktop or your laptop computer, the hardware wallet should be able to pick it out. And then that other point was around, there are some attacks that basically try to trick you and basically have the change go to an address that you don't necessarily control. And so this is a feature where you can try to figure out, I guess, your hardware wallet is trying to figure out, yes, I own or I have the private key that allows me to spend from this change address. Would you say that's a fair summary?
Yes, also like for the latter part about the change, I think what's also important is not just that you have the private key needed on the hardware wallet, but also that the cosigners didn't change. So the other public keys didn't change by an attacker.
Yeah. So in that example, it would be something like, let's say I don't know, maybe if I'd set up like a quorum, but then the attacker has changed it to say, no, that actually now it's now I have that other key instead of who you thought had it, and therefore now there's like a blackmailing possibility, that kind of thing. And then the other one was around collaborative multi-sig. So it's this idea of multi-user support, because I guess in practice, let's say, between the three of us, we set up a 2 of 3 multi-signature, and we are storing a lot of Bitcoins on that. And we want to be careful to never have all three, or at least 2 of us in that same, with the hardware wallet in the same room, let's say. So we want to be able to collaboratively, let's say I can sign it, just the first signature, and then I could pass it to one of you to do the second signature. Can you tell us a little bit about that flow? What does it look like, and how does it work in Spectre Desktop?
Yeah, so this is basically 2 features which kind of complement each other, but are essentially different. So first of all, collaborative multisig, you can basically import and export the PSBTs, the Bitcoin transactions you're doing. You can import wallets from others. So for example, you send someone your XPub and they're creating the multisig wallet, and you can import it into your Spectre. Then you can just start creating a PSPT and then sign it on your side, send it to the other party to sign, and collaboratively manage funds. And with multisig support, you can do this on the same Spectre instance.
Multi-user support.
Yeah, multi-user. Yeah, sorry. So the multi-user support, what it is allowing you is just have multiple users on the same Spectre server. So if you want to share it in like a family office, a small company, or just with friends and family who don't know how to set up Bitcoin full node or something, so you can just do this for them and share the instance with them. Or in a small company, you can manage funds together on the same instance.
Also wanted to chat about multi-signature standards, because up until now, it doesn't seem like there's any one unifying or well adopted standard, if you will. I think there's, Electrum is a well-known one, and some of the other providers are sort of using something similar to that, but it's not quite. Do you want to just comment a little bit on the current state of play there? What does it look like in terms of multi-signature standards and what's needed?
So what is really surprising that there is not so many software that supports multi-signature. So like all normal software wallets, they just assume that you use one key and that's it. So that is pretty unfortunate, but good to see that there are now projects that add multisig. So on the standard side, there are standards for quite a while already. How to create multisig addresses, like how to sort public keys there, and um, how to manage all that, and also what derivation paths to use. And in that sense, on the base layer for developers, everything is already out there. Everything is standardized. So what was missing is just the support from the software. And multisig itself is pretty tricky, especially on the hardware wallet side. So as Ben mentioned, hardware wallets need to verify the change addresses. And it depends on the wallet how exactly they do it, because basically you have a situation where you have multi-signature addresses where you have only one of multiple keys. And there are different ways to handle it. Some wallets are stateless, like Trezor and Ledger, for example. They don't save anything in there, only like the recovery phrase or like the master key and nothing else. So they don't save any information about the multi-signature addresses. So in this situation, in order to verify that you are your transaction has a change and this change is indeed going back to the same setup, you need additional information about your cosigners. So in particular, you need XPubs of your cosigners. And then the wallet can verify that, this is actually the change address. Um, Other wallets like Coldcard, Spectre, and Kobo, and Electrum, they actually save the wallet. So first, before you start doing the transaction, you actually need to kind of import the wallet into the device, and then the device can verify that I know this setup already. I know the cosigners and so on. This all this information in principle doesn't matter if you are stateful or stateless hardware wallet. It is all included in the PSBT already. It can be included in the PSBT. So we in Specter Desktop we just make sure that all the hardware wallets receive all the information that is necessary. One note regarding the hardware wallets. Ledger is probably the only one that is decreasing the security of the multi-signature setup if you're using it there. So I would say that Ledger is better to use in the single sig setup, just because they don't do any verification for change addresses if it is not a single sig.
In terms of backing up and so on, let's talk a little bit about what you need to back up for a multi-signature setup. So how does it work right now with Specter Desktop for a backup?
So we are using descriptors from Bitcoin Core, and Bitcoin Core descriptors actually contain all necessary information about the multi-signature setup. So it includes the XPubs of cosigners, the derivation paths, and also the script type. Either you use a native SegWit or nested SegWit. So in principle, just one simple string is enough to recover, to generate addresses and recover your wallet. And yeah, that's basically nothing else. Just a descriptor.
One other point that just came to me from my earlier chat with some of the Electrum guys, Ghost43 was also pointing out how many Bitcoin wallets today, other than I believe Bitcoin Core, do this thing where they've got a receive address chain and then a change chain, and then they respectively have different output descriptors. So what's it look like in Spectre Desktop on that?
Well, basically the same. The idea is that you have this XPubs of cosigners, and then you derive it with zero index, and then the kind of just index for receiving addresses and one and index for the change addresses. Bitcoin Core doesn't use it for the default wallet, but it can use it for wallets that you import when you provide a corresponding descriptor. And well, they don't use it for the default wallet because they always use a hardened derivation there. So if you are using this standard default wallet that is created when you launch the Bitcoin Core, then you cannot have another software that is watching these addresses, because in order to generate new addresses you actually need private keys. So this is the only problem, but it also is a little bit, well, more secure, I suppose, on that side. Like hardened and not hardened derivation has certain trade-offs in sense of security. But yeah, you don't have to use the default wallet that is created in Bitcoin Core. You can also just import the private keys and specify that you want to use this standard way with receiving and change indexes.
And just on the hardened derivation versus non-hardened derivation, at least my understanding there is Bitcoin Core's developers have, I guess, gone for the slightly more secure option of having hardened as the default, whereas I believe most other Bitcoin wallets are using unhardened derivation, and that's like a usability trade-off. Would you say that's a fair summary there, or how would you
Yes,
modify that?
yeah, it is very precise description of what's going on there. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I would personally also do the trade-off to the side of non-hardened derivation here, just because I personally want to have a watch only wallet as well. So I don't want to touch my private keys very often.
I see. And I guess in practice, somebody might use that if they want to regularly, right? If they're regularly accumulating Bitcoins and they want to be able to, monitor that and generate new addresses, that's where, say, the watch only function is a bit easier with a non hardened derivation, right? Or non hardened pathway, right?
Yeah.
And one other point around this whole, like around multi-signature and standards, I know with Electrum, there was some discussion that made it a little bit difficult historically to get Cold Card to work as part of a multi-signature with other hardware wallets. And as I understand, that was to do with knowing what the root fingerprint was. Can you elaborate on that idea and whether that applies within Spectre Desktop as well, or how are you dealing with that?
So I think the problem there was that Electrum doesn't store root fingerprints, or doesn't provide root fingerprints by default, because you don't really need it. So it was, and it is in the PSBT standard. So when you are providing the derivation path for your cosigners, you actually, or for the device, you actually encode it as a fingerprint and then the derivation path. And it is used to detect which of this derivation paths to use. So it is more like a cross-compatibility issue between electrum transaction parsing and PSBT transactions. So I don't think that it is related to actually verification of security issues. It's more like compatibility issues between standards.
Yep. And also, you were touching on output descriptors earlier. So that's like a one way of describing the wallet type, and you've mentioned you're looking to use that natively. So what sort of features and things are possible with output descriptors? Why is that a good idea to use?
So output descriptors basically, it is another standard that is adapted by Bitcoin Core and hopefully will be adapted by the rest of the industry that allows you to just having this output descriptor to derive addresses, however many addresses you want. So yeah, it simplifies the backup mechanism and recovery mechanism for complicated scripts. And the most important ones are actually the multisig addresses, multisig descriptors, sorted multi, that is like more standard, but also in principle you can include their custom scripts. And what would be really, really awesome if we get a mini script support there. So I think there are plans to include mini script to kind of combine mini script and output descriptors, and then with the same language you can actually specify not just single sig or multi-sig, but you can also have a pretty complicated policies, for example, that include time locks or some additional backups keys or policies like either 2 of 3 or 4 of 5 that are different keys. So basically something more involved and more complicated. And that would be nice to have, and I think that we are getting there. So I already saw the pull requests that include mini script into Bitcoin Core, but Bitcoin Core and big changes take time.
Bringing it back to that question of in practice, then what does it look like for a backup? So I know, for example, with Caravan, if you want to do a backup, they have, I think it's like an export of a JSON file, and that JSON file, .json, I think it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. But anyway, that JSON file contains the XPubs. So what does so I guess then the user who has created the multi-signature, they have to basically just make sure they keep a backup of that on a USB stick somewhere and so on. What does it look like for Specter Desktop?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have like the minimal backup is basically what a term we borrowed from Fully Noded and Blockchain Commons, an account map, which is basically like their own format which they use, and we integrated it into Spectre as well. So it just stores like a title, the descriptor of the wallet, and the like block of the birth of the wallet. So when you created the wallet, or when the first transaction is made in the wallet, you also add that. So this is just for to make rescan faster. So you don't need to rescan the entire blockchain when you want to import it again to some wallet. You can just rescan from the first transaction. So yeah, we support this format, like the minimal exporting method. But also you can like Spectre itself is using some more information, just which is not necessary. I mean, you can import just from the account map, but you can also do this from the more rich format, which is also JSON of Spectre, which you can just download again from the UI, from the settings, like a full backup of all your devices and wallets. But yeah, and we also, of course, want to make it interoperable with more, like with Caravan and others, so that you can back it up in other softwares, not just as a file. Yeah, and Fully Noded, for example, you can just scan a QR code. You don't have to download the JSON. You can, but you don't have to. Yeah.
But the QR code actually contains the JSON inside.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
In principle, the minimal amount of information that you need is XPubs, number of signatures required, and type of multi-signature. Well, it's normally sorted multi-signature. Caravan is providing this very minimal information. You can include more if you want, but it is optional.
More of a broader comment. So, in the industry over the years, I guess most people have been operating on single signature because maybe they've been, for whatever reason, it's been technical or they've been scared about moving their setup and stuff. And so they would have been coming from this mindset of, oh, if I've just recorded my 12 words and the passphrase, or my 24 words and the passphrase, that's it. And I can understand perhaps the concern of someone like Thomas Vectland from Electrum. His concern was something like, oh, we want to have the backup be easy for people so that they only write down these words and that's it. They don't need to have like the words and the derivation path and and then all of a sudden now we're coming back into now only technical users know what to do. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that idea. Is it basically, in your view, then, is the practice going to be going forward that, let's say, multi-signature becomes really popular, everyone does it. Does everyone just get into the habit of saving the JSON file? Is that basically what we have to teach people as well?
Not necessarily. There are standards for derivation paths for multisig. So if you are not a techie user, you are probably using defaults. Then you can just have this a few sheets of paper with the recovery phrases with this 12 or 24 words. And then if you want to recover, you just need to remember, was it 2 of 3 or 1 of 3 or something like that. So already order is not important. So it's not important if it is 1, 2, 3 or 1, 3, 2, and so on. Derivation paths, if you're using defaults, will be derived automatically. So in principle, yeah, just having 3 sheets of paper with your recovery phrases is enough. If you are more technical, then you can go further and use additional accounts and custom derivation paths, and then you need to recover using more complicated procedure in JSON files probably, but then you're already pretty technical. So I would say that at the moment, if I remember that these 3 recovery phrases were used in my 203 multisig, then I can recover it.
I see. Yep. And so then really the main concern then is just if let's say a non-technical user, and this is not really relating to making it easy, I guess, it's more just if a non-technical user has done, say, a 2 of 3 setup, they've lost one of those 3 hardware devices, and they didn't have the seed backup for that device, then if they didn't have the JSON file backup, they would not be able to recreate and spend with only 2 of the 3 keys, which they might naively think, oh, I only need 2 keys, right?
Yeah, that's true. So that is actually a good point. I didn't think about that. So if you've lost one of these seeds and you don't have any software already set up, or if you completely wiped everything and lost one of the seeds, then you have a problem. So then probably it is better if you have some kind of PDF that prints out all information like public keys as well. But maybe for the backups, as people tend to put it on paper or something, it would be easier to have something like not a JSON file, but maybe a PDF or some human readable form.
Yeah, I guess that's one other point as well, because if people are coming from single signature world, they're just thinking, oh, just write down the 12 words or write down the 24 words. But if it comes to the point where someone has to manually write out an output descriptor, that's probably getting a bit much, right? So I guess these are just things that people have to think about when they're doing backups, right?
Yeah. Multi-signature in that sense is a little bit more complicated. But it also improves the security a lot, right? So exponential increase in security and linear increase in complexity of the backup.
Yeah. So I guess it just means as an industry, and for listeners who are out there trying to teach their friends how to use Bitcoin, well, they've got to make sure they save that backup file and so on, so that way their friends are protected. And so I think the other interesting part about Specter Desktop is that it seems to me the focus really is just multi-signature, right? Whereas if I compare with something like Electrum, it's got, they've got Lightning, they're doing a bunch of other things along with it. Whereas I see it like Specter Desktop is focused a bit more onto multi-signature only. So I guess arguably that means we are reducing the attack surface and trying to only do one thing well. Would you say?
So yeah, I think first of all, we're also supporting like single sigs for hardware wallets. So if you want to use it with your passphrase or just as single sig, you can do this too. But yeah, we try to first of all, we try to minimize like everything that is going on our side. So we don't even have a crypto library which we're using. We're using Bitcoin Core currently for basically doing all the heavy lifting. So we don't have like a very critical code which needs very thorough testing because we just offload whatever we can to the battle tested Bitcoin Core. And yeah, we just focus on making it easier to use. Basically, we're trying to minimize that attack surface which Spectre adds on top of using just Bitcoin Core as a command line tool.
And in terms of user experience and user interface, what's the feedback been so far on Spectre Desktop?
I think at least first of all, considering the fact that both me and Stepan aren't designers or UX experts at all, I think we did a fairly good job. I think the UI is pretty convenient. Like personally, when I just onboarded myself and when I checked with other users, we got very good feedbacks. There are always some things to improve, and I think especially what is confusing is importing XPubs. So when you need to import the pub keys, especially from AirGap devices, in order to create wallets. So this concept is quite confusing, especially to new users who are not so familiar with that, and we are still thinking on how to simplify it. But compared to command line and even to Bitcoin Core UI, I think we are already very convenient and got very positive feedback from users who onboarded themselves and also just their less technical family even. So I think we're doing pretty good on that. And if anyone who listens to that happens to be an open source designer, we're really happy to get help on that.
Yeah, I would say that at the moment the interface is becoming a little bit too busy. So we are adding new features, new options, more things. So we already have plenty of buttons everywhere, some weird tables and so on. So at some point we need to take a step back and rethink the UI. But there are also always other things to do, like bug fixing and making sure that it is reliable and fast and so on. But I'm personally pretty happy with the interface. Yeah, it could be better, but works.
For sure. So where to next for the project?
One important thing that I am really missing is replaced by fee. So at the moment, when the fees on the Bitcoin blockchain are going crazy up and down orders of magnitude, yeah, sometimes I see that I send a transaction and I need to wait for a day, but I was just trying to refill my phone, for example, or something, and I would like to be able to bump the fee. And Bitcoin Core supports this, but there are certain problems with implementing that inspector at the moment. So that feature would be really nice. Another one that is really awesome, and also I personally want it desperately, is a proper support of the pruned nodes. Because I personally run it, as I said, on the very cheap VPS server that only has like 25 gigabytes of storage. And at the moment, if I'm importing an old wallet, I can't really do it. So I need to re-download the full blockchain for that. Supporting of prune nodes is already another very nice thing. And bug fixes because more people are started using it, and we have a wide variety of platforms that we need to support and test. So like Linux, oh my God, Windows, Mac, and also ARM Linux. So all this stuff is pretty complicated, but sometimes we face some bugs, but we will fix that. Yeah. And yeah, on the future, Ben, maybe you can also continue.
Yeah, so we're now working on finalizing the desktop app, which should make it much easier to set up, like as easy as any other desktop app, I believe. I think like generally we have like probably the most like versatile hardware wallet support, but I think like as more companies create more hardware wallets, more options are available, we will want to add as many as possible. Another thing I think will be really cool is mobile support. So right now you can like set up Spectre as a server on your machine or your laptop or anything, and access it for mobile. But we have very bad UI for small screens currently. So maybe in horizontal mode you could use that, but it's not really proper support. So I really hope we will have some better mobile support in the future. And besides that, I hope it will be much more stable. We're currently like as more users are being onboarded, I guess new bugs are kind of arising, and we need to take care of that every time. And they become like stranger and stranger. So like something which happens on a very specific type of machine, which we didn't like check ourselves, which we don't have, for example, or something. But I think we're handling that pretty well, and I hope that it will be much more stable in the future. Yeah. Besides that, I just hope to onboard more users and just grow up the community of the project.
Yeah, it would be nice also to have a few more contributors.
Yes.
Yeah, sure, of course. One other thing that just came to my mind now as well. So I guess just thinking about when you're maintaining your setup, some of the guided multi-signature platforms, such as Casa or Unchained Capital, they have a concept of like a key check or a health check, where you might periodically go and check that the key still works, that there has been no bit rot or things like that. Is that something you would look at building into Specter Desktop?
How exactly does it work? Maybe I didn't quite understand.
I think it essentially signs a message to check that the key is
Mhm.
still intact.
Yeah, you can always like create a test PSBT, for example, without actually sending it. You can always like verify addresses on your device to check that the private key is matching. You can verify also the like old addresses, the new addresses. You can all see them on the device to check that the device private key is matching, basically. And you can always like do test transaction. You can always like sign transaction without actually propagating it. So just save it or delete it, whatever you want. You can manage like pending transactions. Well, pending might be confusing. So just transactions which you created in the past, you can save them for later. Or if it's test, you can just delete it after you finish signing with everything. So we could maybe add some like more easily like uh, health check, but I think you could just do like a very tiny PSPT and then delete that after you're done.
Yeah, or just sending transaction to yourself basically
Hmm.
without broadcasting it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's another idea. All right. Well, I think those are the key points I wanted to touch on. If listeners would like to find you online, they would like to contribute, where's the best place for them to find you guys?
Telegram group, I think.
Yeah, we have the Telegram support channel for the community. We have the GitHub page, which users can just open issues if they want. But I think we're mostly available on Telegram. Like we respond there the fastest. And I guess like if anybody prefers like privately, like my DMs on Twitter are open. But yeah, I think the Telegram is probably the best.
Excellent. All right, well, I'll include those in the show notes for listeners. So Stepan and Ben, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Get the show notes at stefanlivera.com/205, and I'll see you in the Citadels.